And for a different perspective, joining us is Ahmed Soliman, a senior research fellow for the Africa program at the Chatham House in the UK. Thank you very much, Ahmed, for joining us. A couple of shaky ceasefires in Sudan have allowed foreign nationals to be evacuated. Is that taking too much focus at the expense of heightened mediation efforts?
I think you can see it in both ways, perhaps. I mean, yes, there is a lot of focus on nationals and Sudanese who are evacuating parts of Khartoum and other parts of the country. But in the other perspective, that is keeping attention on Sudan, as well as I think from the diplomatic side, this is, an attempt really to have these staggered ceasefires, even though we can argue about the success of these ceasefires. I think fighting has continued in Khartoum, the twin city of Omdurman, and many other parts of the country during these ceasefires, and even today, this morning. But these efforts, these diplomatic efforts, are hopefully, going to be built upon to work towards a more permanent cessation of hostilities, which would require negotiation between the two parties, bringing the two parties to the table. So I think it's part of a process that the international and regional community are working towards.
Right, and that brings me right into my next question, which is, after foreign nationals have been evacuated, will Sudan move closer to an all-out civil war, or is there still room for peace to prevail?
I think there's a narrow window for peace. The likelier scenarios is really that the fighting will continue to intensify and evolve, both in the capital, in Khartoum, and other parts of the country, including Darfur, as we're seeing. But with a unified coalition of international actors, and we're seeing some of that coordination happening, as your piece mentioned, the regional effort by IGAD and South Sudanese presidency to try and get a ceasefire in place has been buttressed also by the United States and Saudi Arabia, and the Quad mechanism as well. So you're seeing more coordination from regional and international actors to try and leverage the parties towards the negotiating table. So there are slim hopes of that taking place, because there's little strategic shift in the balance of forces between the two parties, between the RSF and between the Sudanese armed forces. So that gives them little incentive really to come to the table, unless there are punitive measures on the table by regional stakeholders, very influential, and the international community.
What, in your view, needs to be done to put Sudan on a path of stability?
Well, I think first, what I was mentioning is this coordinated effort. This must continue. The leverage points need to be found. So we know that regional stakeholders, including Egypt, the Gulf Arab states, the Saudis and Emiratis in particular, are very important actors, and in terms of the relationships with the Sudanese armed forces, as well as the rapid support forces, and very important economic actors. China also is an important economic actor, given its interest in oil in the country. So leverage points both economically, but also in the broader level, a much firmer stance, and considering and putting on the table punitive measures towards the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF, should they not cease this war and come to the table for negotiations, and putting the civilians at the forefront of the process. Yesterday, we saw an announcement by a much broader unified civilian front in Sudan, calling for a return to a civilian government, and calling for the removal of the militarized forces from political and economic life. I think the international community needs to heed those messages and support them as much as they can.